You're listening to Two Girls, One Crossword.
Happy New Year's! Happy 2023, everyone.
What's the song?
But what is that song really saying?
I don't even know if I know the lyrics.
Let old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind.
Auld Lang Syne is a popular song, particularly in English-speaking places, sung to bid farewell to the old year at the stroke of midnight on New Year's Eve. Thank you, Wikipedia. The lyrics: should old acquaintances be forgot and never thought upon, the flames of love extinguished and fully past and gone, is thy sweetheart now grown so cold that loving breast of thine thou canst never once reflect on Auld Lang Syne. On Auld Lang Syne, my Jo, on Auld Lang Syne, thou canst never once reflect on old. Oh, that's the original. Sorry. That's the original. Oh, okay. I'm like, I don't remember the song at all. All right. Should old acquaintances be forgot and never brought to mind? Should old acquaintances be forgot and Auld Lang Syne? For Auld Lang Syne, my dear, for Auld Lang Syne, we'll take a cup of kindness yet for Auld Lang Syne, and surely you'll buy your pint cup. Whatever, this is really long. Essentially.
But it is saying, like, forget your old acquaintances. Leave toxic people in your past.
I think it's saying, it's got a question mark saying,
oh,
should they be forgot and never brought to mind? Question mark.
Well, that's a decision you have to make for yourself. I will not be forgetting my acquaintances. Not this year.
Not this year. Not in 2023. The year of our Lord, 2023. That's crazy.
And you know what everyone should be doing in the new year?
What?
Locking their doors.
Locking their doors.
I don't care where you live. Lock your doors.
Seriously.
And sorry, we were just talking about this earlier, which is why it's on the mind. But I want to share a security tip for anyone who didn't know that
beep,
this
beep,
exists.
Beep. Security update from Grace.
You know, they sell these like films that you can put on your windows that make it very hard to break your windows. It kind of like if someone takes a bat to your window, it holds everything together. Like the glass will crack, but it kind of holds everything together. I think that might be what's on car windows. But anyways, all that to say is that it's very cheap and, you know, not me because I don't live on the first floor, so I'm fine. But if it's just an extra little thing that you can do for yourself.
It's true. And
yeah, well.
You can also pay for an entirely private army.
Yeah.
Private
Security
guard, if you will.
That, if I was rich,
it'd be over
I
for
would
you
have
idiots.
A security team.
Grace with her security
just
team.
For my
she's like,
paranoia.
She's got her baddie like earpiece in.
No one is after me.
Well, that's the thing is like, yeah, nobody is, well, not that we know of, is targeting us, but you can be the target of a crime at any point. I think a lot of women constantly think about the crimes that can be committed against them. And so I think a lot of times women are more like security minded, or not, I don't want to say more security minded, but like we have a lot more instances where we need to be personally aware of security things.
I got a lot of stuff. I got like a keychain that I can press that like alerts,
alert
people.
Alert.
I have
the president of the United
pepper
States.
Spray. Yeah. Straight to the White House.
Biden's like, what's wrong with Topeka today? Yeah.
Anyways, that's me.
Just girl things.
Just some fun stuff to start off the new year with.
Yeah.
Safety is important for everyone.
It really is. No. I can't remember. I was gonna say, speaking of 2023, it's a new year, which means it's a new start. Not that we call our like years seasons, but it feels like a new season for Two Girls, One Crossword. Am I right? Like
maybe we will. I mean, we can. We have the option on Anchor. I don't know.
Oh, maybe we should.
Yeah, sure.
Season. This is season 4, I think.
Yeah, but we've only been putting everything to season 1 up till now, so I don't know if we should make it season 2. I just can't believe we started this before the pandemic. Like, that feels like a lifetime ago.
I feel like we recorded more episodes remotely than not remotely?
Oh yeah, for sure.
It's
Because I think we started
crazy.
in 2019.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy to think about. But that's where we are. I mean, I was looking at, and we'll tell you why in just a minute, but we were looking at our topic master list. We keep a list of like topics that we've completed so that if we ever are like, wait, did we cover this topic? Or, we want to bring it up in our podcast, like our hits and shits. We're like, oh, you can listen to Barbie episode, this one, blah, blah, blah.
Hmm.
I was looking at it yesterday and like seeing how many episodes we've done. We color code it by year so that we know which year is which topics. And I'm like, oh my God, we get a new color because it's a new year. And
Yeah.
some of the topics we covered last year, I was like, I thought we covered this years ago, 5 years ago
know.
at this point. We haven't even been doing this for 5 years, but I'm like, what?
Well, sometimes it feels like there's no new topics to discuss. I mean, it gets harder and harder. Like
does. It does.
every
Who knows?
week.
We may hit a dry spell at some point, my friends, because there's only like so much kind of finagling you can do to make a topic work sometimes.
Yeah.
You're like, I'm going to do this topic because the letter P was capital and the P reminded me of the president of the United States. We're talking about presidents today, Sometimes I feel like that's what I'm doing to get a topic.
Sometimes what you have to do. Should we go into our Pollapalooza from last week?
Oh, yes. Oh, this is the first poll of the new year, but it's a poll from previous year's topics.
Mm-hmm. If you remember, my last topic of the last year was Tex-Mex.
Ooh.
And I asked on Twitter, what's your favorite Tex-Mex food? And if it's not on the list, mention it in the comments. Okay. Answers were, potential selections were fajitas, nachos, chili con carne, and enchiladas. Okay, to be fair, I never had chili con carne, but it comes up a lot when I was researching Tex-Mex, and then someone did comment saying, I don't think anyone eats chili con carne by itself. Do they? Usually it's put on top of the entree. Beef enchiladas come with chili con carne on top. Okay, well, whatever. I don't know. It doesn't matter because no one picked that. So everyone's favorite Tex-Mex food. First place with 47% of the votes was nachos.
I mean,
nachos
classic.
Are great. Yeah.
A classic. I feel like when I think of Tex-Mex, yes, nachos for sure, Tex-Mex, but I don't think of that as like Tex-Mex in a way. It feels so part of my everyday meal catalog.
Yeah.
That like, not to say that like, well, we've co-opted it in a way. That's the whole point of Tex-Mex, right? Is that it's kind of like this amalgamation.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I guess I'd have to say like, nachos is probably the thing I eat the most, the thing I crave the most.
Yeah.
Maybe I need to rewire my brain. It is Tex-Mex. So would I have picked nachos?
And I feel like nachos transcends Tex-Mex because you can get nachos at like the movie theater. Of course, they're not like real. I mean, it's just nachos with cheese usually, but.
Right. Give me the queso con or whatever it is.
Chili con carne. Well, I used to work at the football stadium here in college. Like my fraternity did it for fundraising. But anyways, we would serve nacho cheese a lot. And we would have to heat up that cheese so hot that by the time we were serving, it was literally like boiling in the plastic. And I was worried it was going to like melt through the plastic.
Right.
So I tell people, I'm like, do not eat the cheese right away. It's like lethal right now. It was an issue.
I worked in the movie theater and our cheese was lethal too. We had like, that hot. And first of all, to get the cheese into the pump, let's just. Miserable.
Ours was like a bag that we would heat up and then put it in the pump. But the one time the bag exploded in the little heating thing and it got everywhere.
Oh, no. No.
Okay, second place was enchiladas with 40% of the vote.
Ooh, Grace made really good enchiladas recently. And
I did. I made them for our New Year's Eve celebration.
And I'll be putting in an order for another tray.
Sure. And then with 13% of the vote was fajitas. I feel like I never order fajitas, but anytime they come out and it's like that,
it's such a
like
display.
going across the restaurant, I'm like, ooh, that looks good.
When I was younger, I was always like, what is that? I didn't know what it was. I didn't know it was called fajitas. But yeah, I've never ordered fajitas either, which is interesting. I would have to say, when I go to like a Mexican restaurant or Tex-Mex restaurant, I guess it depends on which type you're going to. I'm always ordering tacos or burritos.
Yeah, I know. I feel like I don't know. It was hard to narrow it down to just 4, but
no, for sure.
I do feel like I like really big burritos with a lot of stuff in them.
Yeah.
with all the accoutrements.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Chipotle does a good burrito. I'm not gonna lie. I do like Chipotle.
Chipotle has a way with some of the stuff. Like the rice is really good, like the lime
She's
rice.
really
But
good. Yeah.
I'm not going to get into it, but sometimes I have an issue with the way that they wrap the burritos at Chipotle. Like sometimes I feel like they just don't care. It's just fine. It's like, I get it. You don't have to care, but like then it affects my personal burrito. Or they just need better training on how to do it. Because sometimes they put too much wet stuff in the burrito. Like they don't wring out the salsa enough, and then
exactly, and it's just
the
like
tortilla rips.
Yeah, I liked a TikTok about a girl's burrito. She always lets people know that she overstuffs her burrito, and they always F it up. And
then they just slap another burrito on top of it, and then you're like eating through 2 layers, and it's
That's why I switched to the bowl.
I know. I just like the burrito. So I was a bowl person for a while, but it's like I can't quit the burrito. I just love it.
I can't quit you. Yeah.
Another issue about Chipotle, I'm just going to say this, is you always have to order in person, because if you order online, they skimp out on you.
They do.
I get it. They're going, but too many people are ordering at my Chipotle, I think, because every time I go there, it's like they're trying to do the people in line, and then they're doing like 6 online orders.
Oof.
And it's like they need to be able to put a limit on online orders during like
rush hour time. Yeah.
Because of course they're not putting care into every bowl. They have to make like 6 of them in 2 minutes.
Quality starts dropping when you're forcing people to work extra fast on the line, folks. Mm-hmm. Hello. Anyway, I'm hungry.
Yeah.
I'm hungry.
Shall we get into our hits and shits replacement?
Yes. It is time for hits and shits, but this is like a hits and shits like
New Year edition.
Yeah, or like, what is it called? Like not a wrap up, like a remix. We're remixing hits and shits for the first hits and shit of the year.
Mm-hmm.
We've done this in the past. We're essentially going to be reviewing some of our favorite topics from the past year. Mm-hmm. Which we like doing. It's a nice throwback, callback to some of the topics. And like we were talking about earlier, we forget sometimes the topics we do within a year, or it feels so long ago that we did certain topics. And I think if any of our listeners have favorite topics from this year, please write to us and let us know what your favorite topics were. Maybe we'll give you a shout out next episode. Tell us if you learned something. If you thought you knew, but then you were told anew, we'd like to hear that.
I feel like one of my parameters that I judge like a favorite topic is if it's something that I like continue to think about,
Yes.
So I feel like if there's a topic that really stuck with you that you think about a lot, let us know.
Yes, exactly. Okay. Should we hop in? Do you want to start? I can start. Whatever you want to do.
Yeah, you start.
Okay. So what we're doing is we're picking 3 of our favorite topics that we did, and 3 of the topics from our lovely co-host, what their topics they did. Anyway, it's early. Just bear with me. I think one of my favorite topics, I'm just going to go in numerical order because it's kind of hard for me to pick my absolute favorite because there's literally so many. I had to, kind of cull down my list. So I ended up with 4 for each of us. Mm-hmm. But one of my absolute favorites from Grace last year was episode 113, Waxed and Wine, Madame Tussaud, or Tussaud. An incredibly long and storied life from this woman, taking you from like the French Revolution to like a traveling wax show in Britain. Mm-hmm. And now you can see like Justin Timberlake and Britney Spears wax figures like all over the world. It's just wild to hear her story. And the fact that it kind of intersects with like Marie Antoinette, Benny Franks makes an appearance, Versailles. Yeah. It was a good one.
We're going to go back.
Oh, do you want to go back and forth? I don't know.
No.
I'll just go through my list.
Okay.
So then next in the numerical order is episode 115. It's Anyone's Game, which was essentially about decks of cards and like jokers. Mm-hmm. I think about that a lot, and it's one of those things where if I were to dedicate just a little bit of my time and my energy, I might be somebody who collects decks of cards. You know
I
what I
can
mean?
easily see you going down that rabbit hole.
Thank you, thank you. It's just I'm like, oh, the designs on the cards, and not just like the designs on the back of the cards, designs on the faces of the cards, specifically like the Jokers. After Grace did that topic, we found a cool blog where somebody collects like all of the bicycle Jokers from all of like the past century or so, century plus.
Mhm.
Some of the designs are insane, and I'm like, I want to buy all of these, put them on a poster board, and hang it on my wall or something.
Mhm.
Um, I'm a game girl. I grew up with cards. I grew up with games, so anything like that is fun. Anything that has like a pinch of collectability is fun to me.
She's in.
I'm in. You literally cannot stop me. Okay, so then my next favorite, I think this is probably one of my absolute favorites you've ever done, and definitely top of the year is 123 Clean Your Plates, where Grace talked about American license plates. It was really fun going plate by plate and kind of describing and looking at them. And then I always played the license plate game as a kid, like trying to find a license plate from each state when you're on a road trip, or, you know, when I was in high school, I started a list trying to find a license plate from each state, just like in my everyday life. And that plus looking at the designs, and I feel like I'm a connoisseur of license plates now. I can be like, that one's a little bit bland. The font choice on that one is a little, a little strange. That was a good one. And then, of course, this one is just like a nice one as well. 130, let's see. 131, Luck of the Drawing, in which Grace talks about mascots. I just thought some of the origin stories of some of the mascots were hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
Their actual characters are hilarious. Of course, Gritty makes an appearance. Gritty is a fave mascot of mine. Yeah. Those are my 4 top Grace topics from the
We have a
past
lot
year.
of overlap.
Oh, okay. I'm not surprised. These are good. These were some heavy hitters. Some of the other topics didn't stand a chance because these are so good.
Yeah. I know. Some of them I'm like, what was that about?
Trust. Okay. We always joke about the episode descriptions being like impossible to discern. I was trying to update the topic master list last night.
Because you were doing from the episode description. I went in and looked at it from our research in each of our folders.
I know. The thing is, like, I know that that's what I should do. I know that, but I'm so lazy, like opening each folder and then opening each document. I'm just like, I don't want to do that. So I try my darndest to like discern what the hell it is that we talked about going off the episode descriptions. It is hilarious how difficult it was. I was reading a couple to Matt. I'm like, what in the goddamn hell is this? And then I would look at the topic and I'd be like, oh, it's this and this. And I'm like, well, the description means that if you just knew what the topic was. I have a lot of fun doing that as well. So anyway, go ahead.
Should I do my topics for you?
Sure.
Okay, these are some of my favorite Chelsea topics of the year.
Ooh.
From episode 125, Kick the Sweet Spot. It was about candy hearts. That's one that I think about all the time. I even, like, this reminded me, I went to go check to see if they've released their 2023 Valentine theme, but they haven't, as far as I could tell. Like, It's not on their Facebook page. It's not on their website.
Good call, though, because we always say we're gonna sign back on with news for our listeners, but we really will get the sweethearts when we can, as soon as we can.
If you don't or if you didn't listen to the episode or you don't remember, Chelsea talked about, conversation hearts, and I didn't realize this, but every year that company comes out with like a different theme. So in 2022, the theme was like motivational words.
You can do it. You got it.
But they've done like a Twilight theme. They've done a like retro or like nostalgia theme. So I'm interested
sports
to see what
themed, animal theme, like Go Tiger, things like that.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay, and then my next favorite, well, this isn't in any order, but I also enjoyed episode 136, Pick a Doll, Any Doll, which was about Raggedy Ann. Because that episode really just, took you places that you didn't know you were going. So I enjoyed that. Of course, I also enjoy anything that's like haunted or scary. So
that's another parameter, I think, for us too, is a topic that you go into being like, oh, I'll do Raggedy Ann. And then you're like, oh, there's more here. than I could have ever imagined.
That was kind of how the Madame Tussauds episode was for me. I was
Yes.
like, oh, I'm just going to talk about these wax. And then it's like, then next thing I know, I'm in the French Revolution and this bee is taking molds of her dead friends' faces. Okay. And then I also enjoyed game 117, A Game of Chance You Wish, which is when you talked about rock, paper, scissors. Because I always laugh at, when we did that, Chelsea read like, oh, one of the moves that you're supposed, like, the best first move to do is like scissors or something, because most people, or is paper, because most men start with rock.
Mm-hmm.
And then like a couple weeks after, we just happened to be hanging out with our friends, and rock paper, a game of rock paper scissors was afoot. And our friend, who was a man, was there like about to go against Chelsea, and I saw Chelsea like be like, hold on, wait a minute, and I could see her like brain trying to file back like, what's the one that men usually do? And then it didn't work because he didn't do rock. But
oh, piss me off. You literally, you never know what you're gonna get.
No, but I enjoyed all of those.
Very
and
good.
then I have honorable mentions of when we did the same topic.
Yes. Okay. Another amazing part of doing this review was remembering when we did the same topic. The 2 times we did the same topic this year, because it only happened twice, which I think is a par for the course. We usually do about 2 topics the same each year, seeming like.
Yeah.
Well, they were back to back.
Crazy.
We were shocked then. I'm shocked now. I'm still shocked now. And the first topic that we did back to back makes sense. It's an absolutely massive topic. I'm really glad that we did that one back, like we did it together. I feel like we had a lot more to talk about. But the second one was like, not like a throwaway topic, but it was like an easier topic because we had done a really dense topic the week before and we both picked it. I'm like, we'll tell you both of them in just a moment. Go ahead, Grace.
Episode 118, Shop Till You Drop, where we talked about indoor malls, which I still think about all the time. And
I do too.
I hate to say it, listeners, but we haven't gone to a mall yet together, even though that was on our list of things to do.
I know. We should go soon.
Yeah, and ride those little animal things around.
It's cold. It's great to be indoors.
Indoors. And then the next one, episode 119, Just Another Manic Monday, which was about days of the week, which I feel like was one of our more. Both of those episodes were so interesting, and I think about all the time.
Yes.
Like, I always talk about how, like, there's 7 days in a week, and it's not really for any, like, scientific purpose other than humans just have an easy time remembering 7.
7. Exactly. Yes. I also think about those 2 topics a lot. The mall one specifically, I see a lot about, dead malls all over the place, or malls being revitalized into other uses. Like, there's a mall, I think there's one in Chicago that was made into like a public school, and you're like, kids are like posting on TikTok, they're like, it's so weird, like 5 years ago I was walking through Macy's and now this is homeroom. And it's like,
that's amazing.
I'm like, oh,
that's like so smart, because
cool.
you have like the food court and everything,
exactly, and you have it's a big enough space, it's open, lots, the infrastructure's already there. I don't know. Well, should we talk about some of our own personal favorite topics?
Yes.
Okay.
Let's.
Do you want me to start?
You start, yeah.
Okay. I think one of my favorite topics from this year that I did was episode 121, It Takes Two, and where I talk about Bogey and Bacall. That is like a holdover obsession from a very, very long time ago. When I was in high school, I was obsessed with Bogey and Bacall, and it was really exciting for me to go back to that interest as a grown woman and still find their story so intriguing, but also be able to look at it through a lens of, oh, that was grooming. That's what that was. Anyway, great stuff. If you like old Hollywood, would recommend that topic. I also liked episode 122, Agitado Not Stirred, where I talk about martinis and the history of cocktails. One of the only things that America has really brought to the world is a cocktail. Thank you to what's his name, Mr. Tudor, aka the Iceman, who makes an appearance in the license plate episode as well. Thank the Iceman for cocktails, or the Ice King, rather, I should say. Also, 125, the Candy Hearts episode was up there. That's a good one. I have too many. I had to do 5 for this one. I liked 135 as well, which was Mother, May I Sleep with the Un-American Activities, ... The one where I talk again about the old Hollywood and the communist, like the Red Scare, and all
Mhm.
of the stars being like, oh my God, they're going to be blacklisted, blah, blah, blah. And then a more recent one, episode 146, If My Memory Serves Me, where I talk about Ina Garten, who is...
Mhm. That was another a favorite of mine for you because I never like cared about cooking shows. But after we did that, I went to a Friendsgiving and I made an Ina Garten recipe for potatoes.
Ooh, yes. And she's great for like those hometown staples. You
Mhm.
can always count on an Ina recipe. If you're going to a Friendsgiving, a potluck, hosting a dinner
But
party of your
I
own.
think I mentioned this in the episode after but it's like she makes things seem too easy sometimes. You know, I'm like, all right, yeah, I don't have these like herbs that I can just cut from my garden.
That I think that's part of like her memification.
Yeah.
Is she'll be like, oh, just go up back and harvest your goose eggs, and if you don't have homegrown goose eggs, store bought is fine. And it's like, okay, yeah. And she's an Aquarius, and she was born on February 2nd, so kindred spirits.
So move over, Punxsutawney Phil.
Exactly. Well, what about your favorite topics?
My favorite topics were a lot of the ones that you picked. 113, waxed and wined, Madame Tussaud. 123, clear your place, license plates. I think about license plates all the time now when I'm driving. I'm like, that's the old Chicago license plate. Like, that's the new design. Every time I see license plate from different states, I'm like checking it out. And I can't believe that Alex and her dad saw the first license. Well, Alex didn't see it, but only her dad saw the first license plate ever at a grocery store in Massachusetts.
Oh my God, that's the Ice King family, guys.
Yeah.
If
I
you
would
see
have gone
number
up to them
one
and be like,
in
can I get your
Mass,
autograph?
Yeah, be like, we know so much about your family.
I definitely would have
Ice
taken a picture
license plate
with their license plate.
Yeah.
And then I liked episode 122, Agitado Not Stirred. That was when I did bilingual.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one.
When I did bilingualism as a topic. And it was really interesting.
It was. It made me really, really want to be bilingual.
Yeah. It's good for your brain.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's it. Good times had by all.
What a year. Hashtag thanks 2022. And then on to the next one. This is a toast to hopefully an exciting topic year for 2023.
Let's see. I like my topic that we're starting off with. So I
I
feel like
like
we're
my
starting
topic
strong.
too. Yeah. Speaking of liking our topic, shall I flip the coin? Shall we get right into
Flip it.
All right. I'm flipping the coin now. Heads.
Yeah.
What a way to start. Am I right? We are moving into the age of Aquarius, folks. Like astrologically. So it makes sense for me to start off the new year, as they say.
Mm-hmm.
Heading out of Capricorn into Aquarius. Everybody should be glad for that. Okay. Anyway, so my topic is from the December 26th New Yorker by Will Nediger, 11 Across. Elevator pitches, question mark. And the answer was Muzak, spelled M-U-Z-A-K. I was like, what in the goddamn hell is this clue referencing? And so then I Googled it and I was like, oh, that's my topic. That's my topic and you cannot do anything about it. So what is Muzak? Like I said, it's spelled M-U-Z-A-K. Muzak is essentially background music, or better known as elevator music, sometimes derisively. But more specifically, Muzak is background music from a particular brand, the brand being Muzak. Muzak is the brand of elevator music, but I think it's kind of like when you say Kleenex for tissue or Advil for ibuprofen, it's kind of like one of those, right? So yeah, Muzak is the brand, and they produced / invented what we all know as modern day elevator music, which is played in retail stores and other public places. But what is background music as a concept? And I'm just going to read you like the first couple sentences from Wikipedia because I think it's really succinct. Background music is music in which the music itself is not intended to be a primary focus of potential listeners, but its content, character, and volume level are deliberately chosen to affect behavioral and emotional responses in humans, such as concentration, relaxation, distraction, and excitement. Okay. So it's supposed to be vibed to, not necessarily actively listened to.
Mhm.
Background music is commonly played where is no audience at all, or at least no active audience. Empty hallways, restrooms, fitting rooms, or music you're played on hold, like when you're on the phone, or like ambient music in a video game or on a website, for instance. I was trying to think of like where else might you hear background music? An elevator. I guess sometimes you have it now more commonly you don't really have music in elevators, but that could be a place. They don't have it on planes.
When you're on hold, sometimes.
Yes, when you're on hold. But yeah, there's a bunch of different places where there's like ambient background /
That's the
elevator.
thing. You don't even notice that it's there.
Exactly, and that's the whole point. Background music is typically played at low volumes from multiple speakers, which essentially distributes the music across large spaces evenly, so that like when you're standing next to a register, it's not like blaring at you, whereas when you're on the other side of the store, you can't hear it at all. It's supposed to be like an even ambient environment. While background music as we know it, so background music / elevator music, didn't appear until the founding of the Muzak company in the 30s, the idea of background music wasn't entirely novel. So we're going to head once again for the first time this year to Paris, of course. Classic Paris. We are going to be meeting a French composer or pianist, Eric Satie, who was born in 1866. Fun fact about Satie is in the 1880s, he worked as a pianist at numerous café cabarets in Montmartre. And I wonder, I couldn't find if he ever worked specifically at the Moulin Rouge, but he lived most of his life in Paris, either in a direct, like a suburb really close to Montmartre, or in Montmartre itself in like a 1-bedroom apartment. It's very possible that at the very least he was at Montmartre once in a while. He might have played there as well. Anyway, so he had a very interesting life as a composer, pianist, but I can't really get into it. But if you are a longtime listener of the podcast, you will know that the time that he was active, kind of like between the 1870s and 1880s, that was the Belle Epoque in France. So essentially like a really important artistic, developmental, and economically beneficial age in France. Okay. So he was living during that time, during the time where the Moulin Rouge was happening, where people were drinking absinthe and making art and love, I guess. Anyway, so what does Satie have to do with background music? Well, he invented what he called musique, and I am so sorry to literally anybody who speaks French, musique d'emblement, aka furniture music, which is a kind of background music not to be listened to consciously. Furniture music were very short pieces with an indefinite number of repeats. He composed 5 pieces of furniture music, and I'm going to tell you what their names are again, and like when they were supposed to be played, and like again, I apologize for my horrific French, even though I did take French, but not well enough apparently. The first is called Tapisserie en Fer Forge, which is to be played in a vestibule. Then you have Carrelage phonique, which is to be played during a lunch or civil meeting. Then you have the chez en bistrot, which is essentially at a bistro, or un salon, which is supposed to be a drawing room, and then tenture du cabinet préfectoral, or wall lining in a chief officer's office. Essentially, Satie's furniture music was essentially supposed to be like, it's called furniture music in that it's supposed to be like a piece of furniture that it's there and it gives off a vibe and it completes a space. But you don't really think about the sette or, you know, that cuckoo clock in the corner necessarily. It's supposed to be there for the ambience and the vibe, and not necessarily to be like registered and actively engaged with. Here's a review of one of Satie's pieces. Quote, "Furnishing divertissement organized by the group of musicians known as the Nouveau Genre. Furnishing music replaces waltzes and operatic fantasies, etc. Don't be confused. It's something else. No more false music. Furnishing music completes one's property. It's new. It doesn't upset customs. It isn't tiring. It's French. It won't wear out. It isn't boring.
It's French.
It's French." So where does Muzak come into play? So we're going to head back to the United States, and we're going to meet a guy named Major General George O. Squire, the U.S. Army's chief signal officer from World War I. This is the guy. George O. Squire is the guy who invented music. So during the 1920s, radio was still a brand new invention. The technology was difficult or expensive to manage. So in steps Squire, who invented a way for transmitting signals across electrical wires where you didn't need to have radio at all. So I don't exactly understand how radio worked prior to the 20s, but it was essentially Squire who came up with a way to transmit audio through wires, which would then make it easier to transmit or broadcast radio signals into people's homes. And he used this invention to bring radios into private spaces. So that's how radio started becoming popular in private homes. Well, then the radio market and the home got really oversaturated, and he's like, well, what can I do? Like, there's too many people trying to sell radios to like the average Joe. So he decided to transfer his interest away from getting radios into the home and towards delivering music to commercial clients. So he kind of did an about face. He's doing the same thing, but different client. Fun fact, Squire was inspired by the sound. So he originally called his company that sold this like radio thing called like the Wired Radio Incorporated. He loved the name of another company that was kind of cropping up at this time, a company called Kodak. And so he's like, we're going to rebrand. We're going to be like Kodak, but we're going to be Muzak. And that's how he got the name Muzak, which is so funny to me. So now he's not doing private radios, he's doing commercial music. Let's see. And this is where Muzak, the company, found its niche, delivering recorded music to businesses, particularly hotels, restaurants, exclusive clubs, places like that. Speakers playing Muzak were often hidden among large potted plants, so people called it potted palm music as well, which I thought was interesting. And of course, one of Muzak's biggest clients were elevators, where the dulcet tones of Muzak compositions could be heard and would like soothe your nerves. Okay. But like, what is Muzak? What type of music was it, and what did it sound like? Muzak's initial offerings consisted largely of popular songs of the day, right? But they were arranged not as like the big band songs with like the popular artists, but they were arranged as background music performed by well-known orchestras and bands, so that you'd be familiar with the tune, but it wouldn't be like in your face. It's not like you would have like, I don't know, Brenda Lee singing at you. I don't even know if Brenda Lee was active during the 30s, but you guys get it. But then in the 40s, research came out indicating that music had a physiological influence upon behavior, and Muzak was listening. They introduced a program called the stimulus progression, which was 15-minute stretches of background instrumentals meant to give the listener a boost of productivity over the course of an hour. I'm sending you a YouTube, and you could just click it and listen to it real quick, just a couple seconds, just to give yourself a little bit of a taste of what you might have listened to if you were in a place that was under the stimulus progression program.
That sounds very nice.
And it sounds like elevator music, right? Like when you think of elevator music, I think that's immediately what, at least personally, my mind goes to, is that type of sound.
Yeah.
And that type of sound was designed and composed and invented by this company, which I was like, oh, that's interesting. So more about the stimulus progression program. The music was specifically designed to be played during a workday in an effort to maintain productivity. This is capitalism at its absolute worst, in my personal opinion. The music was programmed in 15-minute blocks, gradually getting faster in tempo and louder and brassier in instrumentation to encourage workers to speed up their pace. So if you were to listen to that full clip, it kind of starts like, you know, smooth and easy listening, and it really ramps up, and there's more jazzy elements, and it's like to get people hot and heavy and like, I gotta file this paper faster, faster, faster. So following the completion of a 15-minute music segment, the music would fall silent for 15 minutes. This was partly done for technical reasons, but mainly because company-funded research showed that alternating music with silence limited listener fatigue and made the stimulus effect of stimulus progression more effective. Could you imagine having that play for 15 minutes on and off all day at our office?
While I'm working? No, it'd drive me nuts.
It drive me nuts. There are times where I literally can't concentrate unless it's complete silence. And I have to be really strategic about music that I listen to when I work because it can stress me out. It can, if there's lyrics and I'm typing an email, I'm like, I can't think.
Sometimes I listen to, on YouTube, they have like focus music that's supposed to like, it's probably similar to this where it's like made in such a way that you don't register it that much, but it helps you focus. And sometimes I do use it and it works, and sometimes like, no, I gotta turn this off. I can't concentrate. It's like too much. It depends on what I'm doing.
I feel the same. I do like ambient noise, sometimes like rain. I like a rainstorm sound in the background. I think that's really soothing. But yeah, I think sometimes music can be helpful for me while I'm working, but other times I'm like, if I hear anything right now, nothing is getting done. Nothing.
Or like, have you ever been driving and then the music is like really intense and it's like making the driving even more stressful? You're like, I just need to turn it off.
Or yeah, you get to the drive-thru, you're like, I turn this off. I gotta concentrate. You know, like, I'm gonna read a quote from a one-time Muzak executive, David O'Neill, which is he's essentially trying to highlight the program's benefits for factory and office workers. Quote, when the employee arrives in the morning, he is generally in a good mood, says who. And the music will be calm. Right? I'm like, who is this guy? Towards 10:30, he begins to feel a little tired, tense, so we give him a lift with the appropriate music. Toward the middle of the afternoon, he is probably feeling tired again. We wake him up again with a rhythmic tune, often faster than the mornings, end quote. I'm just like...
People do anything other than, like, give someone a raise.
That's my exact thoughts. It's so dystopian to me to just, like, play music. And, like, yeah, it feels uniquely American, too. I'd be curious if this was a phenomenon that transcended America, but it feels incredibly American to me. I'm not sure. But if you had background music in the UK or anywhere else from any of our listeners, please let us know if you have lived through background music, if you experience background music to this day, let us know. Anyway, so of course people questioned whether music had a subliminal effect. And also in the 50s, it was public knowledge that Muzak was attempting to use music to manipulate behavior. They were accused of brainwashing. They faced court challenges, etc. But nevertheless, during the 60s and 70s, Muzak was at its height. It was inescapable, reaching tens of millions of listeners every single day. During the launch of Apollo 11, the astronauts listened to Muzak to calm themselves. Let's see, Pierre Salinger, JFK's press secretary, wrote in a letter to the Musical Times, quote, the president does have some Muzak played on his plane. He enjoys having a musical background at almost any time and likes a wide variety of music ranging from classical to popular, end quote. Lyndon B. Johnson owned a Muzak franchise in Austin, Texas. That's a whole other thing. I couldn't really get into the business structure of Muzak, but there was a point where they franchised. And I'm like, how do you franchise this kind? I'm not sure. I'm like, what's the business model here? I don't quite understand. Anyway, and then a couple of Muzak slogans from the time. One is, music fills the deadly silences. Okay. And then, Muzak is more than music. And that one was to kind of suggest that Muzak was science-backed and capable of making people feel better, work harder, those kinds of things. But things started going downhill for Muzak in the 90s. Kitschy covers were out, and companies like Yesco began curating foreground music, something they called foreground music. Like, Muzak was all about background music, not being noticed, like a subliminal effect. Foreground music, however, were playlists for companies that were composed of popular music meant to be heard. So that's when you kind of see, like, in Abercrombie and Fitch or Hollister, they're playing, music that you know. Muzak became known as a company who only produced uniquely bland, blippy noises that caused dread in their listeners. And in the 90s, the notion of stimulus progression was phased out for a new idea, quantum modulation, which was a system of classifying music that emphasized not productivity, but mood, feeling, ambience. Like, you want people to feel a certain way when they're shopping in a particular store. I think potentially for exclusivity, but also like to get them to feel like they're buying into a type of vibe, a type of culture, an experience, that kind of thing. I kind of buy more into that than the Muzak thing, but
Yeah.
Let's see. Unlike playlists composed according to the stimulus progression, playlists composed according to quantum modulation were meant to keep audiences' moods stable with songs of similar character. In response, Muzak tried to like reinvent themselves to be like, we're not just making bland music. They restyled their engineers as audio architects, crafting sonic atmospherics for retail environments. Essentially, they were trying to like make a store space feel incredibly different than the outside space. Like that was their vibe. But like nothing seemed to work. Muzak filed for bankruptcy in 2009, but another company, Mood Media, purchased Muzak in 2010. And so Muzak as a concept is still around and then kind of been folded into this Mood Media company. But essentially, elevator music is no more. I don't think we hear elevator music anymore. And if we do, I think a lot of times it's more popular music than what we just played.
Yeah. It's like covers of popular songs too sometimes, which is what I guess they used to do back in the day. But
right.
I just feel like I know that if I was in an office that was doing like 15 minutes of music, 15 minutes off, I would think I was going crazy because I'd be like, wasn't there music just playing? you know,
exactly.
Or I feel like I would like hear phantom music when it was like the off periods.
Yes, it reminds me of Sorry to Bother You, that movie of like, you feel like it's like they're trying to be futuristic. But in fact, it's just a real, like a regression in a way of like a way to control people. It feels like, like I said, distinctly American, distinctly dystopian. It's like, it almost is like it's unhinged. It's like, what if you don't like jazz or something? What if you don't like the way that music sounds? Could you imagine working in an office? Like, imagine what our office could play for 15 minutes on and off every day.
I'd come with like noise canceling headphones. Be like, I can't.
Exactly. I'm like, I only listen to K-pop, guys, so this is not gonna work for me at all.
It's like, do you guys have the 4-hour focus playlist from YouTube? Lo-fi beats to study to? Anyone?
Right. Anyway, that's Muzak. That's elevator music.
Oh, interesting. Now, next time in an elevator, which seems rare these days.
I know, right? You should just play Muzak in your apartment. For the vibe. Maybe.
Anytime when people come over.
Exactly. You just have the Muzak playlist.
Like, what's what? That is actually kind of a vibe. Just to see if anyone says anything.
Yeah.
My topic comes from the Monday, January 2nd New Yorker by Anna Schechtman. 23 across. Time when two hands are raised.
Roller coaster?
Is noon.
Oh, are you doing a time?
I'm doing clocks, time telling.
There was another clue in a different puzzle that was about clocks, I think, and I was like, am I going to do clocks? Are we going to ring in the new year with a time themed episode again? I'm really glad that you picked it.
It did remind me of the week's episode that we did, and it kind of comes into it a little bit. So let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about clocks if you have the time.
Killing it.
Thank you. So these days, most of us have a clock right at our fingertips, our phones. I used to wear a watch regularly, but I really don't anymore because
I used to wear a watch too, but it was purely decorative because I struggle with reading a clock.
I was just talking about this with Alex. Growing up, we had a clock above our TV that didn't have any numbers on it. It was just like dots. But I got so good at reading time that way because I'd be able to, because I was watching TV, it's like, oh, this show starts at 7:30. And I got like really good at reading.
Wow.
Clock faces. So just one of my talents. One of my
so many. That is incredibly impressive. We had mostly analog clocks, or rather digital clocks in my home. So there was no reason for me to, other than in school, learn how to read a clock. I was reading the microwave or like the the digital clock on the TV or something.
Yeah. I remember I'd have friends come over and be like, wait, what time is it? Do I have to go? I'm like, it's 10:30, and like pointing at the clock, and they're like, I can't read that.
They're like, who are you?
All right, so yeah, we have clocks at our fingertips, and we had clocks in our homes, but our earliest ancestors didn't have it. So easy. So the first types of clocks were sundials, aka shadow clocks, and also called obelisks or whatever, but they basically would use the sun, like the angle of the sun, to tell the time of the day. No one knows exactly where they started, but there were a lot in ancient Egypt in 3500 BC. A lot of historians think they were basically used to mark the passage of time, mainly for agricultural purposes. Some people say Stonehenge, which was created in 2000 BC, may have been some sort of sundial, and Chelsea talked about Stonehenge in episode 77, Last Monolith on the Left. But sundials have one major issue. They only work when the sun is out. So if it's a cloudy day or if it's nighttime, they don't work.
You're SOL.
Water clocks were invented to kind of combat these issues, and they were first found in ancient Greece. So water clocks worked by, there would be like a reservoir bowl filled with water, and the inside of the bowl had markings that would, for every hour. And so there would be a tiny hole on like the bottom side of the reservoir, and water would drain out throughout the day, and you'd be able to look at the markings on the inside of the bowl to be like, to check what time it was. However, some iterations had a mechanism that would trigger a mechanical bird that would whistle like at different times. So maybe the first cuckoo clock.
Cuckoo clock.
But
okay.
Of course, water clocks had issues as well, because water evaporates, water freezes, the flow changes depending on how full the bowl is. When it's really full, there's way more pressure in the water. It flows out faster. And the Greeks eventually were able to refine water clocks to make them more accurate by making them more contained and measuring the input of water instead of the outflow. I'm not going to go too deep into why that is better, because I don't necessarily understand. But by 325 BC, they were adapted to have a face with an hour hand. So something to remember, at this time, people were just counting hours at this point. Like minutes, forget about it.
Forget about it. I feel like, there were sand clocks too, I think. Similar concept. Yeah.
Yes. There are also candle clocks, which were an ancient timekeeping device used mostly in Asia. So they kind of work the same way the water clocks did, where a candle would have different lines carved on the side, and it would burn down throughout the day.
Must have to be rich to have a candle clock.
I know, yeah, they're not, reusable. Yeah. But there were also incense clocks, which worked similarly to the candle clocks, but sometimes they would use different smells to represent different hours of the day, or they would be attached to weights that would fall down once incense was burned. Geishas would use incense clocks to measure time with their clients. Chelsea talked about geishas in episode 143, noses and navels. And then, of course, the sand hourglasses.
Wait 1 second. Didn't you talked about incense?
Incense, yeah.
And geishas. That's so interesting that we talked about incense and geishas at the same topic, and it's all coming together in this clock episode. The geishas were using incense.
Was navels? Maybe that wasn't the
I'll look it up. You keep going.
I don't think that was the geisha episode. That must have been but yes, Chelsea did talk about geishas at one point, and I did talk about incense, and now they're combined. And then, of course, there's the sand hourglasses. These are some of the most accurate, reliable, and reusable measures of time. That's just an hourglass. People still use them today, and even when mechanical clocks became more popular, hourglasses were still used a lot on ships. So
makes sense. Interesting. You can't see it, but I have an hourglass right above my finger. It was a gift. You can't really see it, but it's in between that eye and this thing. It's right there.
I believe you.
Crazy.
Okay. So there was one organization that was obsessed with accurately recording time, and it made sense because they had chores and prayers to stay on top of. Yes, it was the Catholic Church and their many monasteries. So basically the monks had to pray at certain times a day, so the church was like, we need like a very accurate clock. And that was when the mechanical clock came onto the scene. So the earliest mechanical clock was installed in 1283 in Bedfordshire, England, in a monastery. The church could afford to employ craftsmen to make these huge clocks for them. And the mechanical clocks used an escapement mechanism, balance wheels, and gears for accurate timekeeping. Again, not going to get that far into how they work because I don't understand it, so I'm not even going to try and teach other people.
Yeah, and they're incredibly complicated.
Yes.
To make, yeah.
Most of them could only tell the hour accurately, not necessarily minutes, and they required a lot of space, which is why they were always in clock towers.
Okay.
They were mostly accurate, but they would be off about 2 hours per day. But at the time, that was like cutting edge.
OMG, could you imagine?
That was like an issue. I mean, a lot of these clocks, they'd be like off every day. You'd have to like reset them. By the year 1300, artisans were building clocks for churches and cathedrals in France and Italy because the initial examples indicated the time by striking a bell, thereby alerting, everyone about what time it was. The name for this new machine was adopted from the Latin word for bell, cloca.
Ah, okay.
Mechanical clocks still exist today, mostly in England and France. You can find one at the London Science Museum. And also, the Prague astronomical clock is a mechanical clock. If you're familiar, if you've ever been to Prague, it's one of the main things in the town square. So basically, these churches and monasteries would build these huge clocks, and then the town would use that as their,
right,
timekeeping.
Timekeeping, yeah.
Someone was coming for the mechanical clock, though. The pendulum clock.
Oh my god.
So astronomers needed a better tool for keeping track of seconds and minutes. They didn't just care about the hours anymore. They needed to keep track of smaller time units.
Of course.
Galileo did a lot of work with pendulums back in the day, but it was the Dutch astronomer and mathematician Christian Huygens who created the first pendulum clock on Christmas Day in 1656. This man never took a break.
He relaxed, not once.
Not to get too into physics, but Huygens basically realized that he could create a pendulum swing path that would stay constant, essentially counting 1 second per swing. These clocks were 100 times more accurate than any clock before. So mechanical clocks would be off about 15 minutes a day. Pendulum clocks would only be off about 1 minute a week.
Wow.
So
that's pretty...
Right? I'm getting a pendulum clock.
Oh my god.
News spread fast, as you can imagine, and pendulum clocks were popping up all over the world, but Huygens wasn't done yet. He went on to invent a spiral balance spring that made pocket watches possible.
Oh.
Then he also invented the grandfather clock so people could have it in their homes.
Grandfather clock. Isn't this an actual watch brand still to this day? Huygens? Keep talking. I feel like it is.
I couldn't get into all that because that was a whole different, topic. So yeah, he also invented the grandfather clock. But what about us? And by us, I mean the U.S. Americans.
Okay.
Please. Played... What? Did you find something?
I'm still looking. Keep going.
Okay. We played a role too. So when the first pendulum clock made it from the Netherlands to the U.S., it stopped working. It was losing hours a day. But why? Well, what they didn't know at the time was that the Earth's gravitational pull changes depending on where you are. And the pendulum swing is affected by gravity. So thanks to pendulum clocks, scientists were able to realize that and learn more about how gravity works. Thanks to the pendulum clock. And coming to the U.S. So thank you, clocks.
Amazing. You're welcome for being here in the United States.
The U.S. also made clocks more accessible, which isn't surprising because if you make them accessible, then people can buy them and you can make money. So in the 1800s, most at-home clocks were grandfather clocks that required a lot of money and space to own. In 1807, two investors in Waterbury, Connecticut, gave Eli Terry, a clockmaker from Plymouth, a 3-year contract to mass-produce clocks. He made a simpler version of the grandfather clock, but more importantly, figured out how to make self-contained shelf clocks that only needed a level shelf to work. Connecticut and later Massachusetts became some of the premier clock makers in the country and maybe even the world. And that is still true today. Clock making is in Connecticut and Massachusetts in the US. And it's also a dying art, but it's something that people who are, they're called horologists or something, HORO, whatever. That's people who are clock makers and tinkerers and fixers. It's kind of like a dying art. But it's very specific skill to have.
Yeah. No, I feel like that's something that could come back as these things tend to have resurgences. Hopefully clockmaking will have a resurgence.
Well, I was reading a couple articles that interviewed horologists, and a lot of them talk about there's some clocks that when you open them inside, there's notes about where the clock was first made, who who owned it, like who fixed it, what year. And so it's interesting to see like, wow, this clock was keeping time like with a pendulum for someone, 100 years ago, and now it's still doing it today. I remember my grandparents on my dad's side had a shelf pendulum clock, and it would always be off, and apparently my grandpa was like the only one who ever knew how to fix it and get it working again.
Oh my
But
God.
it's like, I don't know, I'm sure someone else has laid claim to it, but sometimes I'm like, it would be nice to have that clock, knowing that like, oh yeah, this clock kept time for like my grandparents for all these years,
Right. That's
and
really
now
cool.
it could like keep time for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of cool to think about that way.
It
Phones
is.
don't have the same vibe.
They don't.
But another thing that the U.S. did, which you've talked about in your daylight savings episode, I think, was the U.S. railroad system basically created the need for time zones. So before that, each town had their own clock tower, and they would basically set it to be like, okay, it's noon in this town, let's set the clock to noon. But it meant neighboring towns would be off from each other from like a couple minutes, and this didn't work when it came to trying to schedule, railroad
Trains,
travel and stuff like that. So it forced everyone to basically get on the same page, and time zones were created.
Ah, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Today we have the atomic clock, which uses the frequency of quartz crystals to count time, which really sounds like it has to be fake, but it's not just quartz. I mean, I didn't get too deep into this because this like really went deep, but basically it's like these crystals vibrate at a certain frequency, and they counted how many vibrations equal 1 second, and then they're giving like an electric shock with a battery, and that's
electric. Boogie, boogie, boogie. You mean you didn't figure out exactly how
it's
the
like
clock is made?
It's like when a quartz vibrates 9,670,332 times. That's 1 second. So
like, oh, of course.
These atomic clocks are even more accurate than pendulum clocks. That's why a lot of times when you look at like wristwatch, it'll say quartz on it. It's a quartz crystal.
Oh.
I think they don't use just quartz crystals anymore, but whatever. I don't care. Today, the average times of cesium clocks, which is a type of atomic clock, in various parts of the world, they take the average time from those clocks that provides the standard frequency for coordinated universal time, which has an accuracy of better than 1 nanosecond a day.
Mm-hmm.
And these super accurate clocks, like that's what's used in satellites and stuff,
right? Which we also talked about.
Yes, for scientific purposes, it's very important to know things like to the nanosecond.
Yeah, it's very, very, very rare to have one of those clocks. They're expensive and hard to get. I think there's only like a few countries that have one of these really, really accurate clocks. I can't remember which topic we've talked about that in specifically. So we talked about GPS. It was like in GPS. Anyway, I can't. Anyway.
All right. So some clock facts,
please.
Why is an hour divided into 60 minutes and a minute into 60 seconds? And why is the 24-hour day divided into two 12 sections? Well, obviously we know why a day is 24 hours, but this goes back to Babylonians who used counting in 60s for math and astronomy. Basically, 60 is divisible by a lot of numbers: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, 20, and 30. 12 is also divisible by a lot of numbers. In fact, both 12 and 60 share the property that they have more divisors than any number smaller than themselves. So basically, it just makes sense. Like, it's easier for people to remember. It's easy to divide it up into like different, like you can say like half hour, quarter hour, whatever.
Right. Yes.
It just makes sense. But this hasn't stopped people from trying to change it. So the most notable attempt took place in revolutionary France, of course. The French Revolution. Can't wait to see Les Mis soon next month.
I know, right?
In the 1790s, when the government adopted the decimal system. So the French did successfully introduce like meter, liter, and other base 10 measures. So they were like, we're doing everything else based on 10. Let's do time based on 10. So they attempted to break the day into 10 hours, each consisting of 100 minutes split into 100 seconds. Isn't that crazy?
I can't, I'm like, my brain is like, cannot compute.
I know, it's like, what do these clocks look like? I should look and find a clock.
And 100 is too overwhelming.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
like,
it lasted 16 months though, which is kind of a long time.
Yeah, but in the grand scheme of the universe, it didn't happen at all. Let's just say that.
Okay, what about wrist watches replacing pocket watches? So basically, women had worn bracelet watches in the 19th century, so wrist watches were considered like feminine accessories. But during World War I, the pocket watch was modified so that it could be strapped to the wrist where it could be viewed more readily on the battlefield. After World War I, thanks to a strong marketing campaign, the masculine fashion for wristwatches caught on.
Ah, okay.
So that's why. The oldest working clock in the world is the Salisbury Cathedral clock in Salisbury, England. This mechanical clock dates all the way back to 1386.
Wow.
Each morning, the ropes of the pulley... You saw it?
Yeah, I was there.
That's cool. Each morning, the ropes...
When it was made. Sorry. I'm sorry.
You're a vampire?
Yes.
Each morning, the ropes of the pulley system are wound around barrels. This pulls several weights toward the ceiling. As the day goes by, they lower back to the floor, and the lowering is controlled by a mechanism inside the clock.
Prove it.
There we go. In 2018, the clocks in several European countries lost their unity. At first, nobody noticed, but a few months later, the time difference became too obvious to miss. Some clocks were running 6 minutes late. Clocks that use the grid need a certain amount of electricity to count the hours. In Europe, 50 hertz keeps a timepiece regular. But for months, the grid ran on 49.996 hertz. That means every clock that was on this main power grid fell behind. This included heaters, microwaves, alarm clocks, and ovens.
Wow.
The dip was eventually tracked to a power plant, which was lagging due to maintenance issues. It was eventually fixed, and 25 countries were returned to the right time.
Oh, and that's hilarious, actually.
And isn't it crazy? It's like the clock. I mean, I guess you didn't notice, but it's kind of like, we just listen to the clock tell us what time it is. Other than like night and day, we're basically useless. I'm putting a sundial in the backyard so no one can pull one over on me. And a water clock.
There you go.
Okay, I'm going to end with, in 2016, Big Ben was ringing 6 seconds late to the hour. The pendulum was off. Big Ben is a pendulum clock. And what did they use to fix it? Britain's old 1-penny coins, the type that was in circulation before the country switched to decimal coinage in 1971. So basically adding or removing up each penny to the pendulum varied the rate of its swing and changed the clock speed by 0.4 seconds per day. So they, at the time of this article, they were able to get the clock back to accuracy, and then they started checking up on him every day and potentially adding pennies to make sure he stays on time.
Oh, Big Ben. He needs a push once in a while.
Well, when I was in London a couple of years ago, he was like under construction.
Mm-hmm.
He had a little blanket over him, so I don't know what's the deal. Is he open
a
for
little
business
blanket
again,
or a big boy blanket?
Yeah, a big blanket, I should say.
And
that's clocks.
Also on the side, I feel like owning watches is like a hobby for people. And I also feel like owning like fancy clocks is also a hobby for people. But that's a little bit more expensive than, say, what was the thing that we were talking about earlier that if I got into it would be bad news? Because I would absolutely get
Jokers.
into it. Oh, right. Yeah, collecting Joker's cards. That is a little bit, maybe not as wallet friendly as clocks, but I feel like watches and clocks are a little bit more pricey than like collectible Joker cards.
Yeah, well, like the upkeep of them too.
That's true.
Alex and I
walking into my bedroom and I just had 300 cuckoo clocks.
Well, Alex and I were listening to a book, reading a book with our ears the other day on a car ride, and there was a woman who, she got a clock every year for her birthday, and she would put up in this hallway, and she was 80, so she had 80 clocks, cuckoo clocks, and they would go off like every hour, and it would be super loud and crazy of all of them going off.
Right, and imagine like some of them are like 6 seconds off from each other. Maybe one's 30 seconds, a minute. And then so you've got like, let's say 5 minutes of cuckoo going every hour on the hour.
They didn't acknowledge that, it made it seem like they were all in sync, but they didn't acknowledge the reality of keeping after that many clocks. I mean, there's got to be maintenance.
There's got to be maintenance.
Things are going off seconds, minutes.
Yeah, we've talked about time and the inaccuracy of time so many times on this podcast. Like,
What is time?
Like in the leap year episode, how timing just, you got to have a leap year to get us back on schedule.
Yeah. Thank God that there's people out there who are smart enough to do that, though.
It couldn't be me. I don't want it to be me. I have a hard enough time keeping track of time as it is. Matt keeps his frickin' iPhone on military time. And
Alex does the same thing. It's an Aries thing. It drives me nuts. I'm like, what time is it? Like,
I'm like, what time is 17? Just tell me the time, for Christ's sake. He's like, it's the time -2. I'm like, oh, it's 15 now? What? No. I know it's 5, but it's just,
Yeah.
I don't like having to do math to get my time. You know what I mean?
I just don't see the point in it. It feels like unnecessarily annoying.
I know. Matt did
hey,
it.
we get it. You're cool.
You're smarter than us.
It's like
Yeah.
I think that's like a European thing.
It is. Yes. Matt does it
we're
because
American over here.
boat times are done.
Yeah.
Like timetables for transportation vehicles are done in military time. So it makes sense when Matt was working on boats that he had military time. Matt does not work on boats anymore.
Let it go.
He will. Right? I should just sing "Let It Go" to him.
You know, I have a lot of issues about America, but I will say ice water and non-military time, I'm okay with.
Right? I will accept that wholeheartedly. Yeah, I got to work for a lot of things in life. I'm not going to work for time. You know what I mean?
Mm-mm. Time works for me.
Time works for me. I set the time.
All right. Well, on that note, thank you everyone for your time listening to our episode and for the time listening last year. It was fun to look at our yearly recap.
It was great.
And see. I can't believe we have so many British listeners. That makes me laugh.
I know.
Because I feel like we always make fun of the UK. But I, again, would like to say that we love the UK and we love all of our British listeners.
Yeah, we love everywhere. We just like to make fun of things for the sake of having a joke, hopefully not harming anybody in the process.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like are Americans allowed to make fun of England?
Yeah, I think we are.
That's punching up.
It's punching up.
Considering we left them.
Yeah, we left them. I think we're punching across a divide. You know, we're on the same level. We're just punching indiscriminately forward. Well, anyway. But if we do talk crap about like a personal relative ever on here, like for instance, if you're related to the Ice King or Benjamin Franklin's, we do apologize, my lord. But yes, no, it's been a great time on the podcast today. We're going to have a great time in 2023. And as we move on into the year, we urge our listeners to keep curious, keep on time, stick to your ticket, as Hagrid might say.
And don't be afraid to reach out to us. We are on Twitter at The Good Eve Girls.
Or Instagram at The Good Evening Girls.
Or TikTok at The Good Eve Girls.
Come on down, stick around, and until next time, we'll catch you on the flip side. We'll catch you next week, my friends.
Yes, we will.
Goodbye.